Okay, good afternoon and welcome to the kickoff event for the 2023-2024 Speaker Series. Please take your seats if you're standing at the back and settle down for today's talk. My name is Paramveer Singh. I'm the Carnegie Bosch Professor of Business Technology and Marketing, and I'm also the Director for PNC Center for Financial Services Innovation. The PNC Center is also one of the co-hosts for today's event, along with the Graduate Finance Association, Business and Technology Club, Data Analytics Club, and Smart Women Securities. We are proud to be co-hosting today's W.L. Mellon Speaker Series event and delighted to have William Demchak with us to share his perspectives as the Chairman, President, and Chief Executive Officer of PNC Financial Services Group. From his generous support of a research center to being actively involved in student experiences through case competitions and recruiting, PNC has very close ties with the Tepper School, Carnegie Mellon, and our community. It is an honor to hear directly from Mr. Demchak. Special opportunities like these make student experience exceptional at Carnegie Mellon. At this time, we kindly ask that you turn off your cell phones and put your laptops away for our talk today. It is now my pleasure to introduce Isabel Baju, the Richard P. Simmons Professor of Finance and the 10th Dean of the Tepper School, to formally welcome you and introduce our special guest. Dean Baju.
Thank you so much, and welcome to everybody. It is great to be with you today as part of our W.L. Mellon Speaker Series. This forum, which encourages insightful and lively dialogue, is a hallmark that dates back to its inception in 2006. The series is designed to give students the opportunity to interact with global leaders, CEOs, and management experts. In addition to being joined by our students, we are delighted to have guests from PNC in the audience today. It is my pleasure to introduce you to our guest of honor, Bill S. Demchak. He's the Chairman, President, and Chief Executive Officer of the PNC Financial Services Group, one of the largest diversified financial services companies in the US. Mr. Demchak has had an incredible career with PNC. He joined in 2002 as Chief Financial Officer. 3 years later, in July of 2005, he was named head of PNC's corporate and institutional banking. There, he became responsible for PNC's middle market and large corporate businesses, as well as capital markets, real estate finance, equity management, and leasing. Mr. Demchak was promoted to Senior Vice Chairman in 2009. He was elected President in April 2012, Chief Executive Officer in April 2013, and Chairman in April 2014. Before joining PNC, he served as the Global Head of Structured Finance and Credit Portfolio for JP Morgan Chase. He also held key leadership roles at JP Morgan prior to its merger with the Chase Manhattan Corporation in 2000. He was actively involved in developing JP Morgan's strategic agenda and was a member of the company's capital and credit risk committees. Mr. Demchak is a member and past chairman of the Bank Policy Institute's Board of Directors and is a member of the Business Council. He serves as the chairman of the Allegheny Conference on Community Development here in Pittsburgh. He also serves on the board of directors of the Extra Mile Education Foundation and the Pittsburgh Cultural Trust. Mr. Demchak received a Bachelor of Science degree from Allegheny College and earned an MBA with an emphasis in accounting from the University of Michigan. We are pleased to have a notable thought leader like you with us today. The students have prepared a variety of questions for you to discuss. I will now turn it over to today's moderator, who is my colleague, Anita Williams-Woolley. Associate Dean for Research and Professor of Organizational Behavior and Theory. Thank you for joining us to lead the conversation. I'm really looking forward to it. Please, Anita, take it away.
Thank you. Thank you. All set? Great. Great. Well, we're very excited to have you. We've had a long relationship with PNC, and you've been a good partner to us. But when I contemplate the time that you have been in leadership at PNC over, almost 2 decades now, really.
Made me sound really old.
Well, I was more marveling at all of the things that have happened during that time. It's just really remarkable if you think about, I'm sure you have, the crises, the COVID, the banking crisis, the bank failures, consolidation, on and on. So what do you take from this, especially when you think about, leading in crisis and leading in change? It's just remarkable.
I guess if you don't want crisis, don't go into banking. You think we'd figure it out, but every 10 years there's something that happens inside of banking. I try to think back in the financial crisis when there were days where there were rumors that the government was going to nationalize the entire banking system. I remember I bought PNC shares on the worst of those days at like $16. And I remember thinking it was risky when I did it, it's a 20-fold. Just to give you an idea of kind of what that was like. We try to run, because it's the business we've chosen, right? We keep people's money safe. So we necessarily always try to run in a way where, banking done well is 3 yards in a cloud of dust, and keep everybody safe. And we keep that mindset in the boom times, which then helps us in the down times.
But are there any things that you take from all of these, especially, even just in March, we came through yet another crisis, right? Moving forward, do you move forward having any idea what's about to happen next, or you just?
Yeah. So, the benefit so in financial services banking in particular, everybody looks the same. I've always said that banking's the only industry where you can lie about your cost of goods sold until the economy changes, and then you can't. And if you're running a good institution, we look forward to crises because every time there's a crisis or a mini crisis, we double our size. Someone will fail and get in trouble, and we'll be able to take advantage of it. So even in the little mini crisis in March, I was disappointed that we did not in the end win First Republic that came out of that. But we looked at that, and we also looked at Silicon Valley Bank, and I think practically we'll still find another acquisition target in the near term, simply because we're strong when others are weak. So maybe that's a bit of my personality, but there's nothing like a good crisis to wake you up a little bit and get you focused on opportunities. Yeah.
Do you feel, though, that's been a shift in the industry, in the recent decade, or has that always, do you think the industry is selected for people who thrive?
No, the industry can be, finance in general can bring out the very worst of people. And I think, as you look at problems that have occurred through history, it's more often than not the result of individuals taking what perhaps was a good idea originally to an extreme and losing sight of the downside in pursuit of personal gain, to be blunt. That happens in life everywhere, but in finance it has big outcomes and big swings. That's happened, all the way back to the Great Depression or the tulip bulb Ponzi scheme.
Do you think that's becoming more so now, or?
No, I don't. If anything, it's less so. The little mini crisis we saw in March, was shocking in many ways because the way both First Republic and Silicon Valley got themselves in trouble was the most basic, simplistic finance 101 in business school failure I've ever seen, that somebody could run a company that large and actually cause that outcome. That was just, they shouldn't have been running companies. And then the regulators were, completely asleep. The manual to look, just as an aside, I just out of sheer boredom, I looked at the Federal Reserve risk manual. I found one online from like 1954. And there's exam policies that should have found everything that was wrong with First Republic and Silicon Valley.
So what do you think lies ahead for the industry and especially for PNC?
I think the industry continues to consolidate. There are big benefits to scale that come through technology, client service, ubiquitous brand, the ability to be everywhere, so when somebody moves, you don't have to change your branch, your bank. And I think this little mini crisis has caused a flight to quality and too big to fail. So the big mega banks benefited on a differential basis in deposit flight post-March. PNC grew deposits, but somebody like JP Morgan grew by more, and everybody else kind of shrank, and I think that just gets accelerated. So, when I think about the future of banking, I think there's going to be 8 or 10 large coast-to-coast institutions that are multifaceted, and then there'll be a lot of small community banks. There's 2,000 privately held small community banks in this country. And I think, under $1 billion. And I think those probably survive, and everything else in the middle gets hollowed out, would be my guess. Our intention is to at least double our size in the next window of time, probably through acquisition. My best guess is it takes $1 trillion of assets, plus or minus, to have scale to serve the U.S. in a coast-to-coast ubiquitous fashion.
PNC, though, historically has had this commitment to community engagement.
Yeah.
So as you grow large, you become, a global organization in many ways. What do you see shifting about the type of organization you are in that way?
Hopefully nothing. And by the way, our intention is to grow in a national basis, and we serve our domestic clients internationally with whatever they need. But I always say, look, why do I want to go pick a fight in Europe when the space in the U.S. is wide open, right? We're going to go from 5,000 banks to not so many. So this is the place you want to fight. We do work the community model. When you see us in Pittsburgh and you see our sponsorship of this, that, and the other thing, we do that in every large MSA. We're in the 30 largest MSAs in the country, and we do the same thing. We have regional presidents in those markets. We have foundational giving. We support our signature charitable cause, Grow Up Great Early Childhood Education, and more recently, economic inclusion in all of those markets. And we have people on the ground locally, so we're not flying in to see clients. And the logic is real simple. When the community you're working in thrives, you have a symbiotic relation and you thrive as well. And more importantly, when you are seen as doing good things for the community that you're engaged in, people are otherwise at the margin biased to engage with you. And every consultant will come in and see us and say, oh, you spend way too much money, let's cut all that out. And it's the single last thing we'd stop.
I imagine, though, with the changes in technology that kind of change a lot about banking and how consumers engage with their bank, that also changes how you engage in these communities. What kinds of...
They're two different things. I mean, certainly our clients interact with us differently. We always talk about on the consumer side where, you get everything you need to do with your bank on your phone and you've got digital apps, and more and more that's the case until there's some sort of personal crisis and then you want to go into the branch to solve a problem. It's also true on the corporate side. So the technology now that we're deploying into corporations, into an Oracle ERM system and a Fortune 100 company where they basically through APIs just import all of our payment capabilities, that's massively different. Corporates still, I'm guessing at this number, but they probably still do 50% of their payments by physical check. It's astonishing. So massive changes and continuing.
But I imagine it could become expensive to maintain some of the local presence that you've had, especially if you're competing against others that are not doing that. I know earlier you were telling me about some of the innovations you've had for trying to keep.
Yeah, some of it, that's branch costs. But I want to distinguish between physical presence and branches, and we'll get to that in a second, and community presence, right? Which is when we're sponsoring a speaker series somewhere, or we're sponsoring the Race for the Cure, or our employees are volunteering at early childhood education. All of that stuff we do forever, right? That's part of our brand building in a local community that says, okay, this is a good organization. The physical stuff, right? So where do I have a branch? We have less branches than we once had, right? We call that kind of thinning the network because you don't need one on every corner. We're using, as I told you, we've been using these mobile branches, which are completely cool. That's what I want to do for my next job, are these big 40-foot trucks with, they're complete branch. So they have offices in them, ATMs and everything else. And you send them to some of these small towns that you can't afford to keep a full-time branch. And you basically put them in the community park, and they're there Tuesday morning, Thursday morning, Saturday morning. They can cover 5 or 6 markets for the cost of one branch. So things like that, I think develop and change. Money's like your doctor. It's different, right? It's not like the drugstore. It's not like the gas station where you just go to whichever one is, around the corner. Money has an emotional tie and a brand that is somewhat lost on, I'll just say, younger people until there's a problem. And then they realize the importance of having somebody who can solve that problem.
When I was thinking, I hope it's not going to become a luxury to be able to go talk with somebody if you're, worried about paying your loan or whatever. I think a lot of people value that, as you say.
Yeah.
So. Well, we talked about technology changing how customers interact with PNC, but what about other parts of the organization? What kinds of changes have you seen in terms of how you make decisions or how you operate internally?
I think through time, if anything, we've become a flatter organization. You're forever in a fight against bureaucracy inside of a large organization and people who do meetings just for the sake of going to a meeting. Through time, we've become a place where you go to the person who is the expert who knows the answer. So people don't have a heart attack if I go down 4 layers in the company because I happen to know that somebody built this model or that model or wrote this paper. And I don't want to get the filtered version. I want to actually talk to the person who's the expert. That's a big deal in some companies if I did that. People actually expect me to do that. Our board does that. Most companies, the board of directors, they have a question, they'll go through the board secretary or the general counsel, and then there'll be meetings and somebody will send a memo. Our board, because I don't care, they just call whoever they need in the company if they have a question on something. I don't have any ego that bothers me to have to be that channel. And if I set that example, the company changes the dynamic of how we work together. Of course, banking itself, just through the shift in technology and regulation, which has piled on in the last 10 years, has changed dramatically.
So how does PNC sort of think about that as they move forward and, managing those changes in a way that you remain competitive?
Look, I think in the end, scale matters. Corporate banking, retail banking are symbiotic. We want retail banking the deposits effectively allow us to fund the economy, right? Short and simple way to explain banking. And you need both. The person who figures out how to be the low-cost delivery channel for retail with the best service wins, if you can do that at scale. The corporate business is a more of a skill set, one-on-one, relational, solve the problem, you win that business. But as table stakes, you need the retail business to fund it. It's got to be low cost, great products, and the most important thing is when you screw something up, which we always do, or the customer just does on their own, that it's really easy to fix. So the self-service element that you get on a mobile, if you were late on a payment or you need to change that or you're traveling or whatever it is you want to do, ought to just be really intuitive and straight on your apps. You get that right, you ultimately win.
So what additional changes do you anticipate coming as a result of, I mean, you know, everybody is just wondering, worrying, excited about AI, depending on who you talk to or when you talk to them. When you look at it in your context, what do you see what are you concerned about, if anything?
Well, step back. So traditional AI, the modeling-based elements we've been doing forever. By the way, if you don't turn the model on to learn, it looks an awful lot like the regressions I used to do, 40 years ago. Challenges inside of any company has more to do with the data than it does with the science behind how you interrogate the data. So clean data in one place with enough compute to actually be able to build models. All of our energy right now is largely around that. How do I have, my PhD quants aren't spending 90% of their time finding data and then stitching data and then waiting 5 hours for the result of their query. Right, I become much more productive when we face. So all of our energy's around that. All this buzz on ChatGPT and large language models and just generative AI in general, it will be something at some point. But when something like this happens, we tend to hang around the hoop and watch who makes mistakes for a while because it's a lot more buzz than it is real, in my view. Eventually it'll be something. We worry a lot about it from the bad actor side as it relates to fraud, impersonation, right? We've just kind of blown up all the traditional sources of authentication, potentially, on the back of AI. So we worry about it from that standpoint, but much less so on competitive advantage in terms of growing the company.
In terms of how your organization operates or even the culture of your organization, do you see changes there as a result?
Of AI?
Yeah, or other technology.
Look, I think the person, the skills necessary to succeed in today's world are very different than they were when I started. So literacy with technology broadly, literacy with data analytics. We send a bunch of people to CMU for a data analytics course. They don't have to become hardcore modelers, but importantly, they need to know how to ask the question of what might be solvable based on the data we have. That continues to change, right? If you can't navigate what is relevant in today's world, then your own career path becomes challenged. More and more about banking becomes driven by having a stable and secure technology stack. If you get that set up, it's cloud native, you're API based, your ability to deliver new products to customers is simplified and easy, right? So it's all about our tech stack, it's about creativity in products, it's about client service, and it's about employees who can kind of move along with the change and the developments that have broadly happened in our economy, not just in banking.
And do you see any challenges coming in terms of your workforce?
It's getting a little easier to recruit people, keep people than it was a couple of years ago. I don't know that we see challenges in our workforce. What I would just say to everybody, ever since I've been working, it's been extremely clear to me that if you field the best team, you win. And my job in running a company is actually, it's kind of hard to execute, but it's very simple to describe, right? I need to pick people and choose strategy. It's all I have to do, right? I don't run the day-to-day business. I have very good leaders who run our businesses. If I bothered them every day with the daily update, I'd drive them insane. So I choose leaders and I choose strategy, and ultimately in the course of choosing leaders, I want to be able to pull from a very diverse pool of people, not just in ethnicity and gender and nationality, but the way they think, in every which way, shape, or form, right? My job is to figure out how to get the orchestra to play, even though two people might be complete opposites, but together they form a phenomenal pair. That's always there. Our challenge in being a good and a dynamic organization, a place where people want to, start and join and grow their career, is more about the leaders we have down the line from me, where, we talk about, if you're a quote a manager, you're running a business. Your business results is only, that's part of your deal. Your bigger deal is you're managing our most precious resource, which is our employees. And so how are you doing with that? Are you, training and promoting? Are they going to head everybody in the company other than myself, I think, has somebody working for them who will get further in the company than they are. Little statistics in there. But you think about that, this is practically going to be true. And the person who can identify that talent and harvest that talent, by the way, gets promoted into my seat. Right? The notion that you're always going to be the best is something. There's somebody at every little thing I ever thought I was good at in my life. There's 100 people at PNC better than me in each one of those tiny little skills. My job is to figure out who they are. We have a lot of great people, so that's just a continual effort. I don't worry about it. We've been focused on it. It's part of how we do business and one of our primary missions, since I've been here.
Well, that's actually a great transition to a question I wanted to ask you about your advice for those who might be here, who might be thinking about entering your industry. What kinds of abilities should they be trying to develop, or what kinds of experiences should they be seeking out to prepare?
Well, I guess in banking is interesting. The odds that you land in the seat that is the right seat for you, I think, is pretty limited. Only because there's an infinite number of things you can do in finance, right? You can be a pure modeler, you can be trader, you can be a technology person, you can be an accountant, you can be a lender, you can be a client person, you could be a wealth person. You could, forever and ever. And when you go and you start a job, like imagining what my day looks like, we always get wrong. It's rare you kind of land and say, yeah, this is exactly right for me. One of the nice things about our company is, first we do the internships, but secondly, we encourage during that process and even the first year for everybody to look all over the place and encourage, hey, I got this wrong, or, I'd like to try that. Or even if you got it right and you just want to grow your career, but you want to jump over here to see what's there. Banking is infinitely variable. The one thing I said to a bunch of students we just sat down with, which I would just remind everybody, lesson every single day in your life is always be one of those people with positive energy. The person who can figure out the solution to an ugly problem. The person who always says good morning, right? The person people want to be in the room with. Now contrast that's easy to say, and I always have to remind myself of this. Now contrast that to the person where you got an ugly mess, you're in a crisis, and you get in a room and you're sitting down with people who say, this stinks and that stinks and they did it wrong and I don't know how to fix this and I hate that person and life stinks and I got to take, you don't want to be around that person, right? Always be the person who's going to work on the positive outcome And even when things are really dire, be the positive energy person. Think how valuable that is to you every single day, throughout your day. Even if it's not your natural being, think about when you see other people like that, how powerful that is to what you can do. And that's the biggest thing I would suggest to people as they go out and start their careers.
And it sounds like you've been successful in bringing a strong leadership team around you and good people into the organization. Among the things I teach in OB is hiring. So what do you look for, and how have you been able to find the right people?
We hire the vast majority, of our employees straight out of school, and they stay with us. The vast majority of our promotions or new seats as you get higher in the organization, by multiples, are promotions from within. So you get it right at the start, to the best of your ability, and it's backgrounds, it's good schools, it's creativity, it's purposeful diversity at the start. It's very focused, measurement, opportunity set, leadership standards, promotion schedules, that then drive this diverse talent that you're bringing into the company up through the company. So you always have, very dedicated succession plan, and you always have a menu of, we have a really important job that's opened up, who's sitting on my bench that's ready for this. If we get that right, that's 90% of the battle. We're pretty good at it.
Well, I don't want to occupy the entire conversation. I know we have students here who probably have questions that they want to ask. I've been asking some of the questions that people sent, but just want to open the floor in case others want to ask.
Hello.
Thank you so much for your time today. I'm an MBA student at Tepper, and I wanted to dig a little deeper down on the field of conducting an orchestra, trying to get people from diverse viewpoints in the company. Given how large PNC is, it has multiple divisions and verticals. Could you talk a little bit about how, as a leader, you cultivate that environment where people can constantly question the way things are, and also not going beyond the fact that it might deviate PNC from its projected growth or the value principles that it stands for?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I do a couple things right at my level. A lot of companies, I have an executive committee that has heads of business, and it has, general counsel and HR and the staff functions. Every single one of my executive team members has their day job, and then they also have a job that overlaps into somebody else's business, purposefully. So my head of corporate and institutional banking runs our Visa credit card relationship business. My balance sheet manager runs our retail lending business. My retail person has some oversight into the wealth management products. So purposefully eliminating right at the top the silo function that can otherwise exist with a line of business. The other thing we did about 20 years ago was I blew up all of the product P&Ls. So I said, look, we're going to have a relationship-based P&L and goals, but I'm not going to divide up what we make from a good client into, these 20 products and try to figure out how to portion it out to people. Just get over it. It's a scorecard. We want to grow our wallet with a client. We'll figure out how to pay people later. And took a long time for people to get used to this notion that the scorecard could be a little fuzzy. And when I did that, I said, listen, we're fighting over this pie that's kind of shrinking for our slice of that pie. Let's just grow the pie. If we double the pie, I can be pretty sloppy in the way I cut it up, and everybody's going to be real well fed. So we've kind of driven that notion of letting lines of business just overlap with each other. And sometimes we double count. I don't care. That ultimately causes behavioral outcomes where people aren't fighting. You're not my enemy. I want you to get ahead. If you succeed, that means our team If you did something great, that means our team did something great, right? We celebrate each other's successes, and you just drive that each and every day. I'll repeat, I don't know that song, but I'll repeat the question. Yeah.
So, according to Wall Street Journal, conventional wisdom, we only had one soft landing in the last 60 years, it was 95. The Fed now, based on the subjective definition of soft landing, they're saying that the data points to soft landing nowadays. Other side of the spectrum, we have Jamie Dimon saying, it's a huge mistake of being overly optimistic about it. And then we have Gorman, we have Mr. Handler saying, on the great side of the spectrum, saying, hey, this may be a white collar recession. So, as one of the most important persons in the people of the financial system for the US, I would like to know what's your views of like the current situation moving forward, and if you resonate, if any, with any of these views.
I mean, long story short, they're all right and all right at the same time, and they're all taken slightly out of context. So I think the expectation, right, my expectation would be a soft landing. Now, maybe that's a slight recession. I think it'll be a full employment slight recession. Maybe you see GDP shrink for a couple of quarters, which technically triggers one. What Jamie was talking about, and he's right, is the tail risks to the downside are quite large, right? Either through geopolitical tensions directly with China or, issues in Ukraine. And that was his point, which is like, it probably is going to be okay, but it could be really bad. And so when there's this when you're in finance and there's the potential for something bad, right, you protect against the downside. And we see that in kind of the variance of the scenarios we run. Absent geopolitical stuff, near-term risks for the economy is the Fed, if they lose control of the back end of the yield curve, right? The yield curve's been flattening longer and rates have been going higher. If they go up another 2 points, so the 10-year were to go to 6%, you would bankrupt a couple really big banks in this country. The Fed could easily lose control of the back end of that yield curve. Simply, the amount of issuance that they're doing and the deficit, a variety of other things. So, give me, right, my perfect path. It's a soft landing. They're going to land this thing. Unemployment's going to go over 4 to maybe 5. I don't think they're going to get inflation down to 2. I think it's going to get down to a high 2, low 3 handle, and they'll let it grind for a while. They'll keep front rates high for a period of time, and I think the curve steepens out. But, yeah.
Hi, Bill. I'm a first-year MBA student. I also actually used to work for PNC before I started my MBA, so nice to see you. You talked about the doubling PNC size through acquisitions. I worked on the BBVA acquisition during the integration process, and obviously we did that really, really fast. So I'm wondering, what is it you guys are looking for when you look at acquisition targets, and is there any capabilities that PNC maybe isn't as strong in right now that you guys would seek to add as part of an acquisition?
No, we're in the businesses we want to be in. We want to be in them at greater scale and to fill out some of the markets where we're lacking scale. If you think about what we do, basically, we do everything you would otherwise do in banking absent big capital commitment to capital markets and big capital commitment to international bankings. We are a very large domestic bank for retail all the way up through very large corporate. We just need to do that in more size, right? The amount, we can scale our technology spend. If we're spending, couple $3 billion a year in technology, that doesn't have to double if I double our size. Same thing with our marketing spend. so on and so forth. So that's what we're after.
Thank you. Thank you for your time today. I'm a new faculty member in operations management, and I think a lot of specific questions were asked today, but I kind of want to hear more about the bigger picture of your career path. So from undergrad to MBA, and then to JP Morgan, and then to PNC. During your career development, what are some critical moments and critical decisions that you made and how you came to those decisions? I think I'm just generally curious about those. Thanks.
Yeah. Well, first of all, luck. I landed on Wall Street when personal computing just became mainstream. I know it's hard for everybody to believe, but when PCs and PCXTs were showing up. I mean, we had spreadsheet analytics, so Lotus 1-2-3 precursor to Excel. We had, I can't tell you how many Russian physicists we hired after the fall of the Berlin Wall. That basically, I mean, I don't know. So the model for the heat diffusion index for an atomic bomb is the same as Black-Scholes, just as an aside. That's a scary thought, but true. So I landed at an opportune time when all of a sudden finance was becoming quant finance, and it never had been. And my brain worked that way. And I get bored easily, so I would just get involved in things, build them, hand them off to somebody else, do it again somewhere else. So everything from our cross-border business, derivatives, credit derivatives, structured finance, all the NYMEX options on oil I set up and built to hedge out our loan book in oil, because there was just like a never-ending stream of new things to figure out and do, and I would chase those and do a complete reboot inside of my job. So I didn't try to keep what I did before. As I grew something, I'd give it away and go do something else. And I would just keep trading sideways. People thought I was absolutely nuts because I just wanted to do something new. And it wasn't in pursuit of necessarily making new money. And after a period of time, I knew everything. I mean, I had built everything there was that was in modern finance inside of JP Morgan. I came to PNC, it was more, first of all, I left JP Morgan. We sold the place to Chase. I stayed for a couple of years on contracts, and it was just a god-awful, horrible place to work. Jamie's done a nice job with it, but back then you had this survivorship from Manny Chemical and Chase, like the worst of that group who survived merging with Chase, and we were just like nice people. Like we just got run over. I mean, they wanted to kill us all. They didn't actually want anything from us. And so I remember going to work one day, and I was just miserable. And so they were giving me this big promotion where I was going to run basically every complicated thing in the trading business around the world. And that should have been a good day for me. And it wasn't. So I walked in, and right when they were about to make the announcement, I told them I can't do it, I'm resigning. And I left. Not to go anywhere, but just because it was no fun. And I ended up at PNC just because I had some clients I used to cover in Pittsburgh who asked for help. And I didn't have anything better to do. So here I am, yeah.
I just want to follow up on that, where you're talking about shifting across these different areas of the business. Would you recommend somebody do that today?
Over and over and over again. Yeah, I think it's exceptionally rare that you land in the right spot, and that if you sit and wait in one silo, waiting for your boss to retire or die, I mean, it's a terrible way to go through life. They jump around, because when you're jumping around, you'll run into paths in your career you didn't even know were there. You'll learn something different. You'll meet new people, and particularly in times of crisis, when something's busted, right? When something's in big change, dive at it. Like, stability isn't your friend in your career. Craziness is. I honestly believe that.
Do you think it's getting easier to manage a career like that now than it was true when you were doing that?
I don't know what it means to manage. I mean, look, I think you can do that and enjoy your job and get paid well. And, you know, people get stuck in this mindset of, hey, I'm going to give up. Like they're unwilling to invest in themselves. Because if I don't want to go over here because it's the same title I had and I know I'm expert over here. So if I go over there, I won't be as good as I was and maybe I'll get paid more or less, but I just want to go up. That's a huge mistake, right? If somebody lets you trade sideways to get paid the same but get an entirely new skill set, take that trade every single time. You know, and it's just funny. People are unwilling to do that. That's a mistake.
Before I ask you a question, I just want to say I had the best experience at PNC Bank on Walnut Street in Shadyside. Like going to bank is never a good experience, but I just want to, give credit that your branch manager was amazing. Just going back to my question. So I think everybody can be an expert in certain areas if you come from MBA here or any other university, taking whatever degree that you want to take. But I think jumping from that functional expertise to a leader that you've done, I think it takes a different kinds of skill sets and personalities and characters. I wonder what you think is the most important trait if you're looking to go into leadership from that managerial position into that leadership position that you have taken.
I wish I knew a simple answer to that. I'm probably a much better leader than I am a manager. I'm not a particularly good organizer. I'm not terribly organized. Pretty much a disaster. But I've always prided myself on finding talent and finding talent in unique places in unique ways. Every single one of us has like a unique skill set and the ability to kind of tease that out of somebody and then put them to work on a team that's in their most productive space. I've always been good at that, and I've always appreciated the weirdness of people. You know, it makes life interesting, right? To just find different types of people who together can do great things. And yeah, I don't know how you teach that or not. It's my general curiosity, I think, about everything in life that probably has helped me that way. Somebody in the back there.
Bill, thank you for your time today.
Yeah.
I just wanted to touch a little bit more on what your view is on your work-life balance, especially as being a CEO and what you bring to that aspect. I know that term is always thrown around, but just wanted to take your take on that tug of war of life.
Yeah. Question was on work-life balance, and I got to tell you, I don't know that my job is on 24 hours a day, 7 days. I don't get good vacations. You know, every time I think I'm going to take a few days off, something blows up. But it's not like I was when I was an analyst working 120 hours a week. You know, it's more that it just doesn't go away. But I have endless, hobbies and interests and I have great kids, and I think it's less of an issue when you get to be a CEO, other than the mind share that's just always going on in your head, than it was when you start your career, where you're physically on doing something, oftentimes for lots of hours. So it's just different. I don't know how to shut it off. I've been doing it. I mean, before I did this, I was running global trading desks that literally I would, go to sleep before cell phones, with 2 landlines in my apartment. And after cell phones with 3 different cell phones, and I fully expected to be woken up 4 or 5 times a night, every single night. That's just what my job was. But it didn't mean that I didn't go to the gym that night or go see a show and go out to dinner with my friends. That was just what the job was.
All right, we got one more question, I think, back here. Yes, thanks.
I'm Thomas. I'm a second-year student in information system undergrad. I have a question. Since you earlier mentioned about catching up on trends, you were lucky when we all followed when you started your career. We're now in a new wave of trends in generative AI. How do you see that plays a role in the future of financial industry, and how do we cope with the rise of generative AI, especially in financial? Thank you.
Yeah. Do you think we're in a structural trend on generative AI, or do you think we're in a buzz right now?
I mean, it's definitely really changing innovation. There's a lot of, it simplified a lot of jobs. So just curious, how do you see it like?
See, a structural change, right, is alternative energy right now, right, and changing the grid versus we know, petroleum-based products are going to be here for a lot of years, but we have one that's going to be growing and one that's going to be shrinking. Generative AI to me it's going to change, as it goes forward, certain things that we do in customer care, perhaps the way we code, through Copilot and some other products. Right now, it's a lot of capital being thrown at hype. There's nothing structural about it. And I think it's interesting, when AI came out, you remember a handful of years ago, everybody said, oh, AI is going to, forget about generative AI, just straight up AI was going to reduce employment and operations. We're going to get rid of, people will get up and say, oh, 80% of my operations staff is going to go because AI is going to do this. That isn't what AI did. In fact, what actually has allowed operations to be more efficient is straight through processing and old school technology where there's more self-service on the customer side, so that it never gets to the back office to begin with. It wasn't AI, it was just logical enablement of tech. Anyway, it's more than you want to hear, but every couple of years we jump on some crazy new, thing that gets piles of capital thrown at it. Maybe AI will be that thing. It doesn't feel structural to me. It feels like a next step in the evolution of the way we're going to use technology.
Thank you. Yes, well, thank you very much. We're at the end of our time, but we appreciate your coming and enjoying the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for your time with us today, Mr. Demchak, and for all of your candid remarks. I personally learned a lot. One of the things that is sticking with me is how to break silos, because I worry about that every day. And I wonder if our students are going to think about banking. If you don't want crisis, you shouldn't go into banking. I'm quoting you. And crises get focused on opportunities. I'm quoting you again. So thank you so much for all these remarks. And to commemorate your time with us here today, I would like to present you with a plaque that is from the series.
Thank you.
So, as I said, we greatly appreciate you for spending the day with us on campus. We know that you're very busy, and we appreciate the time that you're taking with us. For all the students in the room here, please thank our guests again. So I'm now going to announce the next speaker in our W.L. Mellon Speaker Series, and that will be on November 1 with Christina Casodis. She's the Chief Executive Officer of the Allegheny County Airport Authority, and I know everybody in Pittsburgh has lots of questions about the airport. Once again, thank you so much for being here, and have a great afternoon.